Welcome to the Society for International Development U.S. Chapter's second post-pandemic and largest ever annual dinner. I'm Catherine Rafelson, President of SID-US. We have more than 800 people here in this room tonight. Your appetite for convening is stronger than ever, and we are happy to oblige. It's a tough time to think about celebration, though. So much is so very wrong in the world, and we at SID-US are deeply troubled by all the humanitarian crises and strife that only seem to be escalating. But we also want to find ways to come together to share our successes as well as resources, ideas, and concerns. We talked a lot about the seeming contradiction of gathering a community for whom a major focus is addressing food insecurity and honoring a luminary for his exceptional work on this front as we indulge in what might seem a lavish dinner. To try to ease that a bit, we will donate a percentage of the proceeds from this evening to the World Food Program and to World Central Kitchen. When I told World Central Kitchen founder and Chief Feeding Officer, that is his title, Jose Andres, when I told his chief of staff of our intention to do this, he said this: Governor Beasley is such a deserving recipient of the Award for Outstanding Leadership, and in his service to the World Food Program was also a great friend to Jose and World Central Kitchen. It warms our hearts that we will be in spirit in the good company of Governor Beasley, WFP, and so many of SID-US members who are dedicated to eradicating hunger and poverty worldwide. In addition, the Washington Hilton donates a substantial amount of food from events like this to local organizations in the DC area, such as the Capital Area Food Bank and Charlie's Place, to mitigate waste. So we're grateful to all these organizations for all they do to try to counteract the issue of food insecurity at home and around the world. Food insecurity is, of course, one of the biggest challenges that you all work on, but there are many others. SID-US members work in all sectors of international development and also hail from all kinds of organizations, NGOs, for-profits, consulting firms, private sector firms, universities, think tanks, government agencies, small businesses, large corporations, and everything in between. And our main purpose is to bring you all together in a variety of formats, such as tonight's dinner. In fact, our mission is to connect and convene organizations and people to engage, enrich, and expand our globally minded community to build a more equitable world. So I hope you feel that you have engaged, enriched, and expanded this evening. And to continue to fulfill our mission, we won't stop after dinner. We have a young professionals after party from 9 to 11, right upstairs where our reception was earlier. I'm hearing some skeptical tittering out there. We encourage you all to stop by, and while geared towards the young professional community, this party is always open to the young at heart and anyone who can stay up past 9, which is not me, but I will be there. If I can be there, you can too. Thank you to the Alliance for International Youth and Development, the International Youth Foundation, and Making Sense International, who sponsor our after party. So speaking of sponsors, I want to thank all of the sponsors for tonight's dinner. I really do love our sponsors who do so much more than contribute financially to SID-US. They contribute their ideas, they inspire innovations in our programming, and they truly support our efforts and work so closely with us. We had more than 50 sponsors tonight, and I can't name them all, but you can see them listed on the menu cards at your tables, on the signs around the room, and on our virtual program, which I really do hope you will all take some time to look at. There's really good information there about the sponsors, about our honorees, and about upcoming SID-US events and opportunities. So if you don't look at the program, you might miss out. I would like to give a quick shout out to our diamond sponsor, though, Creative Associates, for their exceptional support tonight. We have 3 tables of wonderful Creative Associates folks here. And also to our platinum sponsors, American Institutes for Research, Chemonics, Counterpart International. We'll have a contest to see who cheers the loudest. DAI, DT Global, and RTI. And I always like to call out RTI for always sponsoring students. Thanks to RTI, we have students here tonight from George Washington University and also Morgan State University. So thank you. If you haven't had a chance to talk with our student attendees yet, I hope you'll find them before the night is through, maybe at the after party. Students and young professionals are really a big focus for SID-US. We hold career fairs to connect them to our members. We provide mentoring and workshops, and we have a young professionals network. And we recently stepped up our efforts to help bring diversity to the international development community through an MOU we signed with USAID last May to diversify the development and humanitarian assistance talent pool through engagement with minority-serving institutions and underrepresented communities in the United States. As part of our MOU, we've been participating with USAID Counselor Clinton White and his team in roadshows around the country to meet with students, faculty, and staff at historically Black colleges and universities and minority-serving institutions. Some of the people we met through connections made on these visits are here tonight, and they come from fabulous places, from Morgan State University, the American Islamic College in Chicago, and a really wonderful range all around the country. The road shows are ongoing, and in fact, one is taking place this week, which is why Counselor White is not here tonight with us, and we look forward to continuing to connect around the country with students and others to educate, encourage, and help them to enter the field of international development. Also, as part of our diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility efforts, for the second year in a row, we are thrilled to have a posse of deaf and hard of hearing students from Gallaudet University who helped us tonight as volunteers and are here to network with all of you as they explore careers in international development. In addition to diversifying the talent coming into the international development space, we also work hard to encourage and support the outstanding young professionals already working in our field. One way we do that is through the Andrew E. Rice Award for Leadership and Innovation in International Development, which we present each year to recognize the achievements of an exceptional young professional committed to advancing the field of international development. 10 years ago, when I first joined SID, the applicants for this award all came from the US and largely from the DC region. Not that there's anything wrong with that. They were wonderful. They were fantastic candidates and winners. But with the help of social media and the growth of our network, we now receive applications from all over the world. More than half of our applications this year came from Asia, Africa, and South America. This is really exciting because it helps us support locally led development, which is really the end goal for all of us. The Rice Award is named for the founder of SID, Andy Rice, who was a visionary, an entrepreneur, and is credited by many with, in fact, helping to create the field of international development. He was also a tireless advocate of promoting and mentoring youth in development, and each year, a committee of our board members, along with Andy Rice's son, Will Rice, reads through the many applications we receive and discusses and debates to reach consensus on a winner. It's never an easy process, and I'd like to thank this year's committee who put in so much time and careful thought. Rula Attar, Garen Hansen, Sylvia Maigret, Will Rice, Kathy Ruskowski, Gloria Steele, Stephen Murray, and our young professional representative, former SID-US intern and AU grad student Chelsea Akyampong. Thank you. And because the decision was so difficult, we ended up with 2 honorable mentions in addition to our winner. Lydia Kabandi, who had tried to get here from Kenya to join us tonight, but had last-minute travel glitches. And Sophia Magdalena Olofsson, who I think is here somewhere, but I haven't met her. Is Sophia here? Yay! Sophia came from New York to be with us today. Both are doing fantastic work, and I hope some of you may have had the opportunity to meet Sophia already, and if not, perhaps you can meet her at the after party. So now to tell you about this year's winner, I'd like to introduce Will Rice, son of Andy Rice, founder of SID. The stairs are farther away than they were at our last venue.
Thank you. Let's have another hand for Catherine Rafelson for putting this whole thing together. Our Rice Award winner tonight is being honored for a technological innovation that promotes equitable development, an app, Sheria Kiganjani, which is Swahili for law on your palm, that allows working class and rural Tanzanians to access the legal services that had previously been inaccessible to them. It got me thinking about some of the technology that my father and the award's namesake, Andrew E. Rice, used in the 20 years he ran SID. When I was a little kid in the late 1960s, and our father would, on certain Saturday mornings, take my older brother and me down to his offices in the DuPont Circle building, which is just down the street here on Connecticut Avenue, it was the technology that interested me most. First was the manual elevator, already an antiquated concept, that my father would have to commandeer because the elevator operators were off on the weekends. Up in the office, there were tape dispensers and 3-hole punches, and even a big, heavy-handled device that could apply a raised seal to a certificate. But as fascinating as these gadgets were in themselves to a 4-year-old boy, they were, of course, merely tools for the adults who were using them to advance the cause of international development. And as remarkable as Sheria Kiganjani may be as technology, it's only as valuable as it is useful in spreading the blessings of the law to all Tanzanians. Unlike tonight's honoree, Andrew Rice was not a lawyer, but he was engaged his whole career in a global competition for the respect and allegiance of the developing world, in which the rule of law was one of the main selling points for his side. Despite all the well-documented failures of the West to live up to its ideals, still, in the Cold War, it was the US and its allies who were promoting individual liberty, supported by a fair and functioning legal system. I think my father would be very happy that development and the law were no longer locked up in a downtown office building, that technology was being employed to make justice a practical reality rather than merely an abstract concept to millions of people who need it most. Our honoree, Neema Magimba, is keenly aware of this interplay between technology and justice. In her award application, she wrote, "I believe in a just society and the power of innovation." Went on to say, "I've embraced innovation's transformative power," and concluded, "I'm eager to continue advocating for a world where justice and development go hand in hand." That's why it gives me great pleasure to award the 2023 Andrew E. Rice Award for Leadership and Innovation by a Young Professional in International Development to Neema Magimba. Yeah, come up. It's a long walk.
This is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, good evening. I am truly humbled and honored to stand before you today as the recipient of the Andrew E. Rice Award for Leadership and Innovation for Young Professional in International Development. First and foremost, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to the Society for International Development, United States, SID, Catherine, the esteemed panel of judges and everyone involved in the selection process, and in ensuring that I arrive in Washington, D.C. to receive this award. It's my It is my very first time in the United States of America, and even though even though I may not be an American citizen, this moment signifies the American dream for me. Receiving this award is a momentous occasion, and I am profoundly grateful and honored for the recognition. I stand here not as an individual, but as a representative of a dedicated team at Sheria Kiganjani, which has been a testament to the power of collective efforts and shared vision and passion among the youth. I am indebted to my co-founders and our amazing team at Sheria Kiganjani, whose passion, innovation, and tireless dedication have made this achievement possible. Growing up, I always knew that I wanted to be a lawyer and to help people attain their rights. But the realization of the transformative power of justice just came to me in 2016 when I was volunteering for an organization that was providing legal aid services in rural Tanzania. The organization would conduct legal aid clinics, and it is in one of these clinics that I met Saida, a young girl from a village in Tanzania who was forced into an early marriage at the age of 13. Not knowing her rights at the time, Saida endured an abusive marriage with an older man until the passing of her husband. Immediately after her husband passed away, her husband's relatives took everything, claiming that as a woman, Saida and her daughters were not entitled to anything. Not knowing her rights once again, and not being able to afford a lawyer, Saida and her daughters were left without anything. Further research showed me that 22 million people in my country cannot access justice easily and affordably because of geographical and financial constraints. It was then that I realized the profound transformative power of justice and how access to it could have changed the life of a 13-year-old girl, but also the community at large. Teaming up with like-minded individuals, we co-founded Sheria Kiganjani, which is Swahili for law on your palm. It's a platform that's bridging the justice gap in Tanzania by providing easily accessible and affordable legal services to low and middle income earners, especially those in rural areas. Through our platform, users like Saida can now talk and chat with a lawyer 24/7. Saida can get connected to the lawyers who are closest to where she is. Users have access to different templates of legal documents, such as contracts. Understanding that the laws in Tanzania are in English language, and majority of Tanzanians speak Swahili, we've provided users with simplified questions and answers in Swahili language, which simplify the complex provisions of the law. We've recently also launched a business formalization feature, which is now helping and assisting small businesses that are facing struggles with legal compliances to be able to formalize their businesses and access financial opportunities. Through Sheria Kiganjani, we've made significant strides, impacting over 2 million lives in Tanzania. However, the obstacles that remain are substantial. The digital divide is still evident, and millions of people await for the promise of justice. Our vision to impact 5 million lives by 2030 is very ambitious. The obstacles we face require collective effort, shared expertise, and a commitment to justice and international development. I invite each and every one of you to explore ways in which you can contribute to our cause, whether through partnerships, knowledge exchange, or leveraging your networks. I truly believe that your involvement can help us extend our reach and inch closer to our vision of bridging the justice gap for over 5 million people by 2030. I would like to extend my sincerest appreciation to our partners, supporters, and most importantly, the local communities that we serve. Their collaboration and belief in our mission have been instrumental to our success. Together, we are not just transforming legal services, we are contributing to a more just, equitable, and inclusive society. Echoing the words of Andy Rice, the right path to a better world is expanding individual freedom combined with cooperative endeavor. Together, let us champion justice, innovation, and positive change for the benefit of millions around the world. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to a future where our shared efforts lead to a lasting impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neema. That was just great. Good evening, everyone. I'm Wade Warren, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for International Development at Deloitte. And more relevantly for this gathering, I'm the chair of the board of the Society for International Development. As Catherine said, this is the largest dinner we've ever had. I couldn't be more delighted to be here with all of you this evening. I was going to say the US GLC dinner is next month, and people around town call that the Foreign Affairs Prom. And so I was thinking, I like to think of this dinner as kind of the international development community's family supper. So welcome to family supper if you happen to have 800 people in your family. As Catherine mentioned, as we enjoy one another's company this evening, we're of course mindful of the suffering in so many parts of the world. SID is nonpartisan, non-advocacy, and we're also nonprofit. So I'm pleased even so that we are able to make a decision to give part of the proceeds from this dinner to the World Food Program and to the World Central Kitchen, as you heard. As Catherine also mentioned, the Society for International Development exists to provide information about foreign assistance, to serve as a convening place for our community, and to bring along the next generation of international development professionals. We like to think of ourselves as the international development community's town square. I have just two responsibilities this evening. First, I have some acknowledgments and thank yous to deliver, and then I'll introduce our honoree, Governor David Beasley. So for the thank yous, first let me start with you, Catherine. This year marks your 10th year as the president of the Society for International Development. You have done a remarkable job. You are creative, you're tireless, you're pragmatic. I don't know how we would do what we do without you, so we're so grateful to you. Thank you very much. Next, I always want to acknowledge the SID staff. The SID staff is tiny. They're just 6 people and a handful of interns. They punch way above their weight. I won't ask you to stand because I assume you're scurrying around in the background as you always are, making sure that things go smoothly. But Julie, Malvika, Dan, Pebbles, Noah, and Max, we appreciate you so much. And next, I have to acknowledge the SID-US board. I love being the chair of this board. It's the best board in town. It's a real working board, and all the members of the board lend their time, their creativity, and the resources of their organizations to help us do everything we do. SID gets bigger and stronger every year, and it's because of you. So could you please stand and be recognized, board members? Finally, we are pleased to have a number of senior U.S. government officials with us this evening. Among them are 4 USAID assistant administrators, Andy Plitt, Jody Herman, Rob Jenkins, and Cheryl Stumbras. 2 Department of State Deputy Assistant Secretaries, Enrique Roig and Rachel Schiller, and the Coordinator for U.S. Assistance to Europe and Eurasia, Maria Longi. So if you all could also stand and be recognized, we appreciate you as well. All right, so now it's my happy responsibility to introduce this year's recipient of our award for outstanding leadership in international development. Over the years, SID has honored people who have devoted themselves to lifting up the poor of the world. From the legislative branch, we've honored Senators John Kerry and Richard Lugar, and Representatives Nita Lowey, Jim Colby, and last year, Barbara Lee. From the United Nations, we've honored Henrietta Fore and Amina Mohammed. And from the executive branch, we've honored USAID administrators Peter McPherson and Andrew Natsios, and Peace Corps directors Aaron Williams and Carrie Hessler-Radlett. And Carrie is here tonight. Carrie, thank you for being with us. We appreciate you. So Governor Beasley, you are in great company, and you add prestige to our roster of awardees. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about Governor Beasley. David Beasley was born and grew up in Lamar, South Carolina, a town of just about 1,000 people, 20 miles west of Florence. He has been a proud South Carolinian for his entire life. He attended Lamar High School, Clemson University, and the University of South Carolina. And if you want to feel, you can clap for the University of South Carolina. If you want to feel like an underachiever, listen to this. When he was a junior at Clemson, he decided to run for a seat in the South Carolina House of Representatives. He was 20 years old. He won the election by a narrow margin, defeating an incumbent, turned 21, and entered the state house. He was the youngest state representative in South Carolina's history. That was in 1979. He rose very quickly through the ranks, becoming Speaker of the South Carolina House in just 12 years later at the age of 34. Again, the youngest person to hold that position in South Carolina's history. In 1991, he switched from the Democratic to the Republican Party, and from 1995 to 1999, served as the 113th governor of South Carolina. David Beasley has been widely recognized for a principled stand that he took while serving as governor. In 1996, he announced on statewide television that he believed the Confederate battle flag that flew over the state capitol in Columbia should be removed. It was not actually removed from the Capitol grounds until nearly 20 years later in 2015, and many people believe his position regarding the flag contributed to his defeat after one term as governor. But he has been hailed since, and in 2003, David Beasley received the John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Award for his stance regarding the flag. After his term as governor, Beasley taught at Harvard University and co-founded the Center for Global Strategies, an organization devoted to integrating developing communities into the global economy. He gained a reputation for bridging political, religious, and ethnic boundaries to champion economic development and education. In March 2017, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres appointed him to the position of Executive Director of the World Food Program, the world's largest humanitarian organization. Governor Beasley, that's when you first came to the attention of many of the people in this room. A man of faith, charisma, and energy, you seized the moment, and many of us were dazzled by what you accomplished, and specifically by your ability to shine a spotlight on the hungry of the world and to raise funds for food assistance. Before Governor Beasley took over in 2017, WFP raised about $6 billion annually for food assistance. When he stepped down in April of this year, he had led the organization to raise $14 billion in 2022. This allowed WFP to assist more than 128 million people in more than 120 countries and territories around the world. Perhaps even more importantly, in his 6 years as executive director of WFP, he traveled tirelessly, mobilizing public awareness for the global fight against hunger. He foresaw the danger the COVID pandemic posed to the world's food supply chains. He warned of the impacts of the war in Ukraine that it would have on food supplies around the globe. He understands that there can be no end to world hunger without an end to conflict. His voice has been a clarion call to action to save the more than 350 million people at risk of starvation in the world today. The efforts of the World Food Program were particularly recognized 3 years ago when the Norwegian Nobel Committee awarded WFP the 2020 Nobel Peace Prize for its work under David Beasley's leadership. And so, Governor Beasley, for all that you've done for the poor and hungry of the world, we are so happy to present you with our society's award for outstanding leadership in international development. Governor Beasley.
Wow, that brought back so many memories in so many ways. But first, Wade, Catherine, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I was talking to some leaders last week. I said, I love being on front stage, the center of attention when I'm fighting for a cause. But it's so humiliating when you're on the center of a stage when you're being honored. It really is, because it's what we're fighting for. And so I stand here really on behalf of you. I stand here on behalf of the 23,000 friends at the World Food Program who would lay their lives down on the line every day for the poorest of the poor. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. And when I was 20 years old when I ran for the House, my mama told me not to do it. The dirtiest corrupt, it'll get you too. And So many. I was majoring in microbiology, planning on going to medical school or play pro ball. I wasn't good enough, but you know, when you're that young, you think you can do everything. And so I only won by 3 votes. And that's a story in itself. But I grew up in a family in the South that was civil rights oriented, and we were always fighting for poor and civil rights and liberties and some of the most difficult places, which really helped me understand the suffering of so many folks around the world. And so I was walking, Trump had just gotten elected in 2016. And it was in December before he took office, and I was meeting with a group of senators. And it was like a Tuesday or Wednesday morning, and there was a Trump transition team meeting near the White House. And they called, asked would I come meet with them to talk about what are the most important international issues. And I had an hour to kill. And it was about 45, 50 degrees, and it was sunny. And I thought, well, I'll walk from the U.S. Capitol down to the transition office near the White House. And so I'm walking down, enjoying this walk, and my phone rings from one of my left-wing liberal atheist friends from Canada. He and I had done some work together in Kosovo and in Sudan. Good buddy of mine. He said, Governor, how you doing? I said, Bob, fine. How are you? And I said, Bob, you don't call just to chit-chat. What do you want? He said, you know, we're scared of Trump. I said, you probably should be. And that was then. And so he said, are you going to take a role in administration? I said, no, George Bush was one of my best friends. We were governors together. I didn't do it then. My ego is self-contained. I don't need a title. I don't plan to do it here. He said, would you take a role in the United Nations? And I said, are you kidding me? No. I said, I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I was doing peace work quietly behind the scenes. And, well, my wife, the night before, had told me the world's in trouble and leaders like you need to re-engage. And I said, I know you're not asking me to get back involved in politics. She said, no, I'm not. Just don't knee-jerk react, say no without giving it some thought and some prayer. And so I said, Bob, I'll call you back. And he had mentioned to me about the World Food Program. And I said, Bob, I don't know really anything about it. I mean, really. I've heard of it. So I called an old friend of mine named Tony Hall, former U.S. ambassador, Democrat, congressman from Ohio. And I said, Tony, tell me about the World Food Program. Oh, my God. If there's ever God's work on earth, it's the World Food Program. I said, Tony, the United Nations World Food Program. He laughed. We both laughed. And so he says, no, you've got to go to the Hill, meet with the Senate leadership. You need to talk about this. He said, you cannot in any way understand how critical organizations like this are to the stability of the planet. And so I went down to the Senate, met with the Democrat and Republican leaders. I said, tell me about the World Food Program. They said, you've got to do this. You're the only one that can talk Trump out of cutting the international aid. I said, well, let me do that, but give the job to somebody else. Well, you know, here we are, right? And so I extracted some commitments out of them. I said, all right, if I do this, you are going to guarantee me you will fight with everything you can to override any veto and fight for the funds that we need to help the poorest of the poor around the world. Because we were facing, if you remember, in 2017, 4 countries facing famine, Trump cutting the budget. I mean, I was like Donkey and Shrek. Pick me, pick me. Why would you do that? And so immediately I started taking advantage of every relationship I had everywhere, from Democrat, Republican sides, working the White House, every angle. And quite frankly, it wasn't that hard. Ivanka, of course, was my ace. But Mattis, McMaster, Kelly, all those, they got it. They understood. You want to buy more bullets? Cut strategic international aid. And we began working and fighting. And when I took the role, I thought, wow, the world population, 7.6 billion at the time. There were 80 million people in IPC 345. I didn't even know what the world IPC 345 meant back then. Still not sure I do. But anyway, I was thinking, wow, I can put the World Food Program out of business. You know, as a governor, you're executive minded. Goals, objectives, benchmarks, measurables, action plan. 80 million people with the wealth we have in the world today, we can put the World Food Program out of business. Is that not what the SDG is all about? So I'm thinking, we go do this. So the first thing was raising that first extra billion for the Famine Relief Act. I remember me and Lindsey Graham and back then Bob Corker, Chris Coons, a whole bunch of us started sitting. They said, Bees, there's no way we can get an extra billion right now. I'm like, Lindsey, we got to do it. We got to do it. Here's what's going to happen. And I was talking to Ivanka. I said, your dad's going to get destroyed, yada, yada. And anyway, Lindsey said, how much you need? I said, I need $1 billion. He said, no, you don't. You need $994 million. I said, that's it. How did you know? Well, we got it. And anyway, people were like, whoa. You know, when I first got there, I had so many of my friends in the UN said, you don't really need to talk like that. You're not using the UN lingo. And I'm like, if I talk like you, we won't get another dime. I said, you got to talk the language of these old guys and gals from Alabama and Illinois and wherever. And it was the same kind of language, whether it was in the Bundestag in Germany or the UK Parliament or Canada or wherever it might be. Because you get this same response. Why? Doesn't matter, sometimes left or right. Why should I send my money down to Guatemala when I've got road and infrastructure financial needs here, educational financial needs, healthcare needs? Why should I do that? I'm like, well, number one, if you're not going to do it out of the goodness of your heart, I'm going to explain it to you, experiential data, why it's in your financial interest and in your national security interest. And so I would give them the anecdotal simplicity of the reality that we were facing. So we went from 80 million my first year to the next year 135. Why did we go up? Because here's what's quite remarkable. 200 years ago, 95% of the world's population of 1.1 billion were in extreme poverty. Almost everybody on the planet didn't know where the next meal was coming from. And here we were 200 years later, having reached 90%, down to 10%. We have built systems, put in place programs, opportunities that are sharing more wealth than any time period in world history. So thank you for what you have done. You have made this happen. But try telling that to the 10% that they're experiencing this hope. And as I tell my young people, the answer is not tearing down the systems that's reaching the 90. The answer is continuing to fight for that last 10% out there with every heart and fiber that we have. So we went from 80 to 135, all this progress that we've been making, and now we're going backwards. And then we went from 135 to 276, but why were we going backwards? Man-made conflict and climate shocks. Now I would tell some of my extremely conservative friends, you might debate all day what's causing the climate change, but come with me, pal. Let me show you how it's changing here, here, and here. And the poorest of the poor are paying the price. And you can debate mitigation all day long, but I got to have adaptation so they can survive right now. And it really isn't that complicated. But we went up to 276 million. You think it can't get any worse? Well, okay, then COVID comes along. We thought it would be over after about a year. Recycled and recycled. Debt of African countries especially, who are now extremely struggling. They can't even afford national safety net program because of the debt they have, currency devaluation, inflation, price of food, price of fertilizer, price of fuel. And the crisis that we're facing now, in my opinion, is nothing compared to what's coming in the next 6 to 9 months. I am mortified about what's about to happen, and what's taking place in Gaza is an absolute distraction from countries around the world that are going to be facing dismal, dismal circumstances in the next 6 to 9 months. And we've got solutions in so many of these places. Working together with you, what we've been able to achieve. In fact, when the Ukraine crisis hit, in every place, for example, in Niger, where we had done sustainable resilience programs, development, 80% of those villages and communities did not need additional support. So when somebody tells me, well, it's about immigration, or I don't want to send any more money down there, I said, well, let me just paint the reality for you. The Washington Post did an article that we spend $3,750 per child at the border. 60 million bucks a week. For $1 to $2 a week, I can have a resilience program down in Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, et cetera, that stabilizes that community. So, Mr. Anti-Foreign Aid, here are your options. $1 to $2 a week for that child, or $3,750. There's not an option C. Oh, well, that. Okay, we're getting somewhere. In Berlin, in Germany, $175 billion for the million refugees over a 5-year period, 70 euros per day, and we can feed a Syrian in Syria for $1 a day, at the most, 50 cents a day. And you know what? The Syrian, the Guatemalan, they don't want to leave home. You know, last year we fed 160 million people. We raised $14.4 billion. That's $39.4 million per day. When I arrived, we were raising $15 million a day before the cut. And so I had designed my strategic timing, where I would go, how I would go, where I'd sit on the plane, how fast I can get off, who I can meet with, and messaging, so that my goal was privately, I wanted to raise $24 million a day, $1 million per hour, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. And I thought, well, we go in hunger. Only to see it get worse and worse and worse. And then the Ukraine crisis comes along, a nation that grew enough food to feed 400 million people. Breadbasket of the world became the longest bread lines of the world. And when Russia began invading on the eastern sector, I immediately went down to Odessa saying, that's bad, but this is going to be worse, because the supply chain to the world, the economic survivability of Ukraine is based upon this coastline of import-export. And so I did that famous tweet, not the one with Elon Musk, that's another one. That's a whole nother story we don't have time to get into tonight, and my staff said, don't you do that? And I'm like, he ain't giving me no money now. What's he gonna do? Cut my money? Don't you love it when you have nothing to lose? And anyway, I did that tweet to Putin and said, look, you can bring famine to the rest of the world if you don't open up these ports. And that was an extremely controversial debate on both sides of the fence. I mean, it wasn't easy, but we got there. And we were able to put the Black Sea Grain Initiative into place, which stabilized and calmed the commodity markets, which was critical because of commodity pricing and fuel cost and fertilizer cost. In fact, that cost of increased fertilizer and fuel cost us $70 million in increased operational costs per month. Do the math. Compound that with inflation, and it was tough. Fortunately, the leaders in the world were responding. We received the Nobel Peace Prize. And that, you talk about a phone call you don't get often. So the year before, rumor was that we were going to get it. So we were thinking, oh, we might get the world, who knows? But we thought we might get it. And they were like preparing speeches and saying, all right, this day you got to be, in Rome and have your suit on. And so we didn't get the phone call. And I told my team, don't ever bring this up to me again, ever. Ever. We do what we do, and let it speak for itself, and it happens naturally. So a year later, I didn't even realize it was the day, I was in Niger. And it was a very difficult day because we were outside of Niamey, and we had ISIS a little bit to the south of us and Al-Qaeda a little bit to the north of us, where we were trying to move food and supplies. And of course, they're trying to block it on supply chain so they can use food and medicine to recruit. I mean, how many mothers have told me my husband or my son or my daughter didn't want to join, but we hadn't fed our little girl in 2 weeks? Mr. Beasley, what were they supposed to do? Yeah, it's not like they can jump in a car from, Maryland and drive over to Connecticut. It's just not that option. And so the military was blocking us out of safety and security. And I said, if we don't get access, your safety and security is going to be compounded by increased numbers of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And so I'm in a meeting just pounding that table, and my phone was upside down on the table, just burning up. I'm like, what is going on? And somebody busts in the room, and I'm looking up, and I'm like, what are you doing in this room? He says, Nobel Peace Prize. I'm like, yeah. Who won it? He says, you did, we did. Well, obviously, that was an amazing moment. Well, who's the first person you want to call when you get a call like that? Your wife, your husband, whatever. Well, you know, as a parent, if you get a call at 2 or 3 in the morning, somebody's drunk or somebody's dead. Well, I didn't know it. She had gone back to South Carolina, but I didn't know she had a dream the night before, which she doesn't have these kind of dreams, but she had this dream that I was killed in Niger. She's never had that kind of dream. So she answers the phone thinking, oh my God, what's wrong? Well, I go to tell her, but I can't speak. I'm choked up. So here in her mind, her dying husband from this dream is trying to tell her, I love you before I die. And I finally, after about 10, 12 seconds, seemed like an hour, I said, Nobel Peace Prize. And she said, oh, that's all? No. I think the Nobel Peace Prize Committee was doing 2 things. Number one, thank you, World Food Program, for your women and men that lay their lives on the line every day. Every day. Number 2, it's going to get worse, and we want you to take this prize and elevate your message to the rest of the world, to awaken the leaders to the reality that we're facing with regards to food security. And so we were able to elevate up to $14.4 billion, but what breaks my heart is that this year at the World Food Program, and I know I don't have the numbers for UNICEF and everyone else, but we're at $6 billion right now. And we're cutting back programs, development, resilience, sustainability all over the world at a time when it's the worst thing to do. And it's going to cost the American taxpayer so much more. I use the metaphor or the illustration, it's like having water lines in the ceiling and a couple of them got leaks. And it's going to cost you $100 to go up there and fix it. Well, I don't have $100. Okay, don't fix it. So 6 months later, you got to replace the mahogany tables, all of the carpet, all of the flooring, all of the curtains, and it's not $100. It's $10,000 or $100,000. We can end migration by necessity if we just get the strategic funding that we need for the resilience, the development programs that help the poorest of the poor around the world. And when you eliminate migration by necessity, then you're left with migration by choice, and that's a pleasant debate. But we continue to stick our head in the sand about the solutions that are so readily available out there, the tools that you have. And I've seen that miracle on Pennsylvania Avenue. I remember when Biden got elected, and we were able to push the Trump administration, the D's and the R's, and both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue up to $3 point something like $8 billion. So Biden gets elected, and of course Samantha's like, how did you do it? We were having some great conversations about how did you protect USAID and the funding, and we talked all about that. And I said, surely y'all not going to do less than Trump at $3.8 billion. Anyway, we both laughed, and she was like, oh my gosh, $3.8 billion. So anyway, the United States is the most giving, caring nation on the planet. And I've heard this, and we don't really know if it was Alexis de Tocqueville that said, America's great because America is good. And if America ever ceases to be good, America will cease to be great. That is what makes America so good, so great. It's the heart of the American people. Because we care. We care about the poor. We care about the least of these. Scott Pelley, 60 Minutes, I utilized as much as I could on 60 Minutes and strategic messaging to move the United States Congress, to move BBC for the UK Parliament. That was how you do that, obviously. There's art in that. And Scott and I were doing a heck of a powerful story on Yemen on the blockade, because I was attacking the coalition, Saudis, UAE, and the United States on the blockade. Well, you know, when I started attacking the coalition, I didn't have a friend in the UN. Everybody's running for the hills. Don't be seen around him. You know how that is. And Scott and I did this story, powerful story. And at the end of the story, we were demicing, and Scott said, he says, Governor, he says, you got the greatest job on the planet, saving the lives of millions of people every day. And I said, Scott, I do. I really do. But I'm going to tell you something that you haven't thought of, and it's going to bother you. And he looked at me like, what could that be? I said, Scott, I don't go to bed at night thinking about the children we saved. I go to bed at night brokenhearted over the children we couldn't reach. And Scott, when we don't have enough money, we have to choose which children eat, which children don't eat, which children live, which children die. How would you like that job, Scott? And he looked at me just mortified and said, oh my God, I never thought about that. And I said, well, we don't have a choice. We have to think about it and make decisions about it every day. And I said, you know what really makes me mad? I had another word in there. I said, you know what really me off? He said, well, I said, at that time, there's $450 trillion now. There's $350 trillion of wealth in the world today. And it's a shame, a disgrace that any human being, much less a child, dies from hunger and starvation. It's a disgrace. So the question is, we need to wrap down, because the young people got a party. Well, it's old folks. In fact, I apologize. I have to stage right, left, right as fast as I can. I got to give a speech in Charleston, South Carolina at 8:30 in the morning, and I have got to jump on a plane tonight. But one of the most difficult questions I would get is, how do I have hope? And I'd love to speak for several hours on development. I mean, I really would, but we just don't have time tonight. You're the experts at that, but how do I maintain hope in spite of all the darkness? I was telling Catherine, your son, Will. He said, I asked him, what does your mama call you when she's mad at you? He said, William. I said, well, what do your friends call you? He says, Will. I said, all right, Will. All the darkness in the world can't put out the light of one little match. That's the power of light. That's the power of love. That's the power of the spirit that we believe in, of loving one another and caring for one another. It rises above religion. It rises above cultural context. It's in that spirit, we're not Democrat or Republican or black or white or male or female, that we're one in this spirit. And when I'm out there in that field, and it can be in the middle of Damascus and behind a rubble-torn building, you'll see some 4 or 5-year-old walk out as like a flower in the desert. It's such a beautiful thing. That's my little sister. That's my little brother. And if we can see every human being as equal, I say from a matter of faith, it's every human being is created in the image of God, and that makes every human being unique, special, and equal. If you want to end racism, sexism, discrimination, see every human being as equal to one another. And when one child is starving, that's my little brother, that's my little sister, and we have every moral imperative to do everything we can. So, here I am. Got to wrap this thing up, but I'm trying to inspire young people, speaking at universities now, because young people, they give me so much hope. But I'm also really hitting hard on the private sector. And so I'm telling the private sector, I gave a speech yesterday to the top CEOs in South Carolina, all the top CEOs in Canada, and I said, it's now your moral obligation to step up. Your charity is important, but that is not going to solve poverty and hunger. You have got to engage. You have got to take ownership in communities of the poor and the needy and do everything you can. You've got to be willing to make a little bit less, be a little bit less efficient to help put the systems in place around the world that bring us to prosperity so that we can end poverty and end hunger all over the world. You have an obligation to do so. I could go on and on. I'm passionate about this because you need the tools to do what you do. You don't get enough credit and enough thanks. I was looking at some numbers before I came up here. Last year, the American people, on average, 332 million American people, gave on average about $21, $22 per person just to the World Food Program. $7.2 billion. China gave 1 cent per person per capita from their country. Who gets more attention in Africa? More press for helping people? We do not sing our song. We have a story to tell because we are out there helping nations, the poorest of the poor around the world, and you are in the middle of it, in the heart of it. Keep fighting. Thank you for what you're doing. I will continue to sing the song and speak out in every way I can. But in spite of all the darkness, I see a lot of matches of hope. And you know, when you get a bunch of matches together, combustion takes place. And that's a revolution of love, and that's what the world needs more than anything. God bless all of you. Thank you very, very much.